So, in today's video, we are going to be talking about the essential factors to consider when choosing a therapist. So, in this video, I'm going to assume that you have already chosen which type of therapy resonates with you the most. So, you're at the stage where you know what therapy you want and you are simply choosing which therapist to go with. The things I'm going to mention are applicable to all therapies, very important factors. So, number one, they need to be a reciprocal for your unmet needs. So what I mean by that is, if you're a person like me who previously or currently is struggling with sort of people-pleasing tendencies, sort of overgiving, being very kind and sort of often seen as soft and accommodating, and you struggle with things such as not being taken seriously, being walked all over because people are thinking, oh, that person won't mind, she's so nice, she's not going to say anything. That was my predominant issue as a person prior to going into therapy. The good news is, and hopefully good for you to hear, is that I am no longer like that. So I hope that gives you hope that you too can overcome those things in therapy and many other kind of self-help tools, which I'll also explain in another video. But in terms of the therapist I needed was someone who would counteract those tendencies. So someone, first of all, that would not take advantage of your kindness and your soft ways, and would actually make you realise that you are not valuing yourself. So for example, my therapist that worked really well for me was a person that was very unmoved by my facial expressions, by my kind of nervousness in a way, sort of not oversharing, I wouldn't say oversharing, I would say more talking very quickly and downplaying certain events, downplaying other people's role in relationships. So for example, if someone had hurt me, I would say, yeah, they hurt me, but I was really, I allowed them to, I was taking too much responsibility. And this therapist I had would observe me almost facial expressionless, which for other people, that may be really not good. But for me, it was really helpful because it allowed me to acknowledge that I wasn't taking myself seriously, because she made me feel very taken seriously. Compared to a different therapist I had, there was another therapist that would kind of sit and laugh along with me if I was talking about a bad experience and laughing as I said it. She would smile and kind of move along with me. And whilst again, other people with different struggles may find that more kind of a warmer approach and sort of feel that rapport was being built. But with me feeling already not very taken seriously, the kind of laughy, jokey approach didn't work for me because it made it feel more like we were just sitting for a coffee, having a chat as friends, as opposed to working through deeper psychological issues. So in my instance, my reciprocal is a woman or a man. I personally did choose to go with women, but that's not necessarily, I wouldn't necessarily advise people to go with the same gender. It really depends on you and what you're comfortable with, and also what the issues were that you've been through. So yeah, I personally wish to go with a woman for this. She was very much grounded at all times, and never once did she respond to my actions, and she would always call out where I'm not valuing myself, where I'm taking on too much responsibility for things. So for example, if you're a person that's on the other side, you're very tough and you struggle with anger a little bit and you've got no problem setting boundaries and telling people what's what, but yet you potentially are not as attuned to emotions, warmer emotions, you would therefore require someone who assists you in getting in touch with your warmer side, your softer side. So it really just depends on what's going on for you, and they need to essentially be the reciprocal for that. So going into point number 2, they also need to be more of what you would like to be. So again, for myself, I really wanted to be someone that knew my value, was grounded in myself, and had my own opinion and wasn't affected by the other person. My therapist was exactly that for me. So if you're a person who wants to be more lively, wants to come out of your shell more, wants to be more extroverted, you would need someone who is got a lot of energy, possibly sort of a coaching vibe. That doesn't necessarily mean to go down the coaching route versus the therapeutic route, but someone that has that kind of motivational energy about them, because you essentially want this person to almost be like a role model for you, someone that you can look at and think, you know what, I want to be more like them, and have a real life example and build a relationship with someone that you want to aspire towards. There's something really healing about that in and of itself. And going into point number 3, they need to be able to understand you on a basic level. It kind of goes without saying that obviously you would want them to understand your deeper issues, which is of course, an obvious. But what I'm talking about here is on a very low level understanding. It's a very low level understanding. So for example, I use a lot of dramatic vocabulary that is it's an automatic thing. It's part of my personality, but it's something that I need the other person to understand. I'm not actually being serious when I say this. So for example, I could say, God, I absolutely loved what I just did. It was the best thing that ever happened, but obviously wasn't necessarily the best thing that had ever happened. And I've had a therapist before who would take what I'm saying very literally, and I often used to feel like I was constantly correcting my language when I was talking to her, and it therefore kind of took away momentum of actually just expressing my issues. And it put a lot more focus on me thinking, I can't say that because she's going to not understand what I mean by that, and blah, blah, blah. And it wasn't even necessarily that we were both from England, we both spoke English, so it wasn't nothing to do with a language barrier. It was just very different personalities. And within those same therapy sessions with this particular therapist, she would also be digging, which is something that I personally really liked. Like, I love to be questioned, and I love interrogations in therapy because it helps you at the end of the day. But that's not necessarily for everyone. In psychodynamic therapy, there's a lot of digging, there's a lot of questioning, and it helps you basically understand what's going on underneath the surface. But this particular therapist was doing a lot of digging and interrogations in areas where there was just nothing there. And it often felt very frustrating. And I think the reason why that was happening was because she wasn't understanding me on a basic level. So things like language, things like mannerisms, facial expressions, she couldn't quite read beyond it and understand what I meant by things. So there was just a lot of clarification. And I would often be equally a bit confused by her and some of the conclusions she was reaching. So there's just a lot of off the mark things, and it just felt like we were very much on different pages. Whereas there was another therapist that I just felt completely heard, even if I'd say something off, like for example, it was the worst thing ever, she would know what I meant. And I think that is actually so important, and I don't think it really gets talked about enough, that just this basic level understanding, super important. So number 4, which I have touched on a little bit already, is someone who is grounded in themselves. And there is the element of grounded in themselves so that I felt taken seriously. But it's also so that you can trust that, get some sort of continuity in the relationship. You don't want to feel like they're sort of telling you what you want to hear. And you don't want them to sort of be almost performing, adapting too much to you, is how I would say. You want them to be them at all times because it will help you see you clearer. So that's really, really important. And the final point is just trusting how you feel inside about this therapist. Go with your gut. Always, always, always. Because even if those 4 things I just mentioned are all solidly in place, but for some reason you leave these therapy sessions just not feeling right, you don't feel good, there's just something off, then that is not the therapist for you. There are going to be times where your therapist says things that are hurtful. There are good, and that's absolutely a given. But there's a difference between that and just feeling generally irritated, feeling generally like, you know what, there's not really much progress here. I'm not really feeling like I'm understanding myself so much. Because for me personally, I did psychodynamic therapy for 1 year. And I'm not going to say after the first session I knew everything, I'd really established boundaries in my external reality and all of that stuff. That's not what it was. It was a process. It didn't happen overnight, this in terms of me not being a people pleaser and all of that. But after the first couple of sessions, I did immediately feel that I'm looking at things differently. My perspective is being shifted. I'm expanding my consciousness. I did feel that way. If you're 3 months in and all you feel is irritated, there's a huge issue. Also, after 3 months, major progress was made for me personally. And I'm not saying that to kind of dishearten anyone that's sort of 6 months in and is not feeling any progress, because there was also a lot of areas that I didn't have progress as well. But what I want to emphasize is never once in my therapy sessions with this particular therapist did I feel unnecessary irritation. I always felt that even when things were difficult, it felt very useful and valuable and helpful, and that a difference was being made. Even if she could have said things in a different way, blah, blah, blah. It was never substantial. It didn't make me feel bad enough to leave. Whereas there's been other therapists where, with the unnecessary interrogations, when I say unnecessary, I guess a better word is just inaccurate digging, like digging to try and find something that's simply not there and kind of not letting it go. This is not positive. This is not something that you should be feeling in therapy. So it's a big sign that you need to get out, because it's one of those things, they're not understanding you on a basic level. There's just something not right, and so you need to leave. And it's all about you, because also there are some therapists that may say to you that you leaving early is a sign that there's something wrong with you. No good therapist would say that, but they may ask you things like, indicate that you've got a pattern of dropping out. But the thing is, it's like, it's your money, it's your time, it's your future, and if it's not working, be a person that drops out. I think we often can get into this habit of thinking, I want to be really reliable and prove things to people. We don't owe anyone anything, right? So don't worry about, I need to give it more of a chance, because there's millions of therapists out there. If you found a good therapist that you have a good feeling about, they're the reciprocal of your unmet needs, they are a good role model to you, they understand you on a basic level, they're very grounded in themselves, then give it 6 months and go from there. Because sometimes it is just simply that the type of therapy you're doing is not helpful for the issue you're trying to solve. So there are those points to consider as well. But this video is just about the factors to consider when choosing a therapist, when you've already decided on the kind of therapy for you. And I am someone personally that's a massive advocate of doing multiple different therapies at the same time, which some therapists do not allow, but some therapists, I think if it's completely different types of therapy, I don't really see why it should be an issue. I also personally don't see why you have to tell every therapist about each other, because ultimately this is, again, your healing, and you do need to be a bit selfish and ruthless with it in a way, because it makes no difference to them, and it's just quite strange that they would want to kind of control that. So anyway, that's a whole different video. Anyway, so we're going to go back to that, but for now I really hope this has helped, and do follow my channel, do subscribe, like, share, comment your thoughts about your experiences. Let's create a community here where we can really share what works and what doesn't, and we can support each other through this. So yes, I hope to see you in the next video.